Welcome back to AiBiz, the show where we don't just talk strategy and success, but also explore the emotional wiring behind how we lead, decide, and show up in the world. I am Sayan, and today we are diving into a topic that quietly shapes everything from relationships to leadership to self worth: victimhood. Not as an insult, but as a mindset where we often don't realize that we're living in. So, our guest, Yosi Kossowsky, has spent nearly 20 years coaching executives, founders, and high performers on emotional resilience, mindset, and communication. And what makes his work so powerful is this: he just doesn't teach people how to feel better, but he also teaches them how to think differently. Because the story that we often tell ourselves about our pain really determines whether we stay stuck in it or grow beyond it. So, today we're talking about reframing victimhood. How do we move from life is happening to me to life is responding to me? How does that shift affect our mental health, our leadership, and even our brain? So, let's dig in. So, Yosi, welcome back to the show. It's a really honor to have you here with us.
Thank you. Really happy to be here with you as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yosi. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But before we talk about all the science and strategy, I want to go to the why. What made you realize that the way we frame our struggles, not the struggles themselves, it often what determines our emotional well-being.
So, in the transition that I was going through from being an engineer into what I do now with leadership development and coaching, I got very involved and in depth in emotional wellness therapy work. And it really was the thing for me that opened up my life and changed my life from being very almost purely logic driven and somewhat disattached from my emotions really into understanding myself. And throughout the process of getting to understand myself, one of the things that became clear was the role of our beliefs on how we respond and react to the world, and especially the ones that we'll call limiting beliefs, the beliefs that we have that limit us from doing the things we want to do, from having the life we want to have. Um, in that circle of emotional wellness, they would call it having the freedom to
Right.
feel that you can choose how you respond and react to your world, to what's happening around you. And so that is really where I was introduced to this concept, to this work, and it was very life changing.
It's fascinating how you put that because it reminds me, that the moment we change the story inside, the experience, outside starts to shift too. And what you said, right, it makes me think about something deeper because I think a lot of people don't even realize that they're living in a victim mindset, right? It's not loud, it's subtle. It sounds like this is just how things are, and I don't have a choice. And most of the time, people don't see the pattern until they're already, the signs are repeating. Like they feel like they're stuck in the loop. So let's go there. What are some of the quiet, everyday signs that someone is operating from a victim mindset without even realizing it?
Yeah, and you're really right, and that is one of the biggest challenges, even recognizing when we are there without
Right.
realizing that we're there. So if we catch ourselves using words about ourselves and others, like this is all I can do. I've done everything that I can do. I can't do that. This is impossible. Then the question is, what if I'm wrong? What if I am wrong? That everything I'm saying that has these limiting language around it, what I think I can do, what I think I can't do, what I think is possible, what I think is impossible. Or even when I'm thinking about others, what others should do, what everyone should know, how everyone should be and should act. These are all, in a sense, limiting factors. And to a certain extent, um, there's a saying that I'm extremely fond of, and anybody who's worked with me has heard it from me at some point. Uh, and it's a saying that as far as I can tell, is attributed to Buddha. Holding on to resentment, anger, frustration, blame, guilt is like drinking poison and hoping the other person will die.
Hmm.
And so another way that we can help recognize where we're at is, how often am I holding on to grudges? How often am I holding on to blame or resentment to others? This is another form of limiting ourselves, of essentially operating in a form of victimhood that takes
Hmm.
away our freedom for a reason that we feel is justified, but actually hurts us more than it hurts the other person.
Hmm. I love how you put the aspect of using limit words, because that makes awareness not just helpful but transformative. And once that awareness starts to show up, it doesn't just change how we feel internally, it also changes how we behave externally, right? Especially in leaderships and relationships. And this actually brings me to something quite the opposite of what you talked about, but we'll get there in like a couple of minutes. But I just want to take a step back and talk about the workplace for a second. How does reframing a mindset shift the way a team functions, communicates, or handle conflicts?
So, one of the interesting things about our mindsets is the way that we think about the world, the way that we set it up in our heads about what we can do, what we can't do, how things need to be, how things should be, how things ought to be, shape the let's say the decision trees that we have in our head about the decisions that we can make. So somebody comes to us and says, "Hey, I need to do X," or we have this problem that we need to solve. The way that I see the world, the way that I believe the world to be, will shape and or limit the decisions, the choices that I find available in my head to make. However, if we're really careful and paying attention to anybody else in this conversation that we're having at work, and they have a different idea, even if we think, oh, that's not possible, that's ridiculous, that's stupid, or whatever, the fact that somebody else can see it differently
Hmm.
shows us that somebody else's mindset opens up different decision trees. And if
Hmm.
we weren't
Right.
be so jumping to judgment and so sure of ourselves, even if the idea that we're hearing actually might not be plausible right now, the fact is there's a really strong chance that whatever possibilities I see are not all the possibilities that are exist.
I love that. I love the quote that you put towards the end. Because it's an important reminder. Because when leadership stops being about control and start becoming more like a conscious response, everything shifts, right? But Yosi, more than uh, uh, talking about reframing of the mindset shift, right? I think it's also um, a neurological one, in the sense, you change the or you try to change the narrative, right, from what you're seeing. So from a neuroscience perspective, what's actually happening in the brain when we reframe a situation, in a positive way?
So to a certain extent, and I don't actually know enough depth about what is happening in the brain from a neuroscience exact perspective.
Hmm.
My understanding is that every thought we have, right, there's something called synapses that are firing.
Right.
There,
Right.
there are neural pathways in our head, and they get shaped at some level by the things that we do, by the habits that we have, the patterns that we follow. And
Right.
there is this idea of neuroplasticity that we can always continue to learn, we can continue to grow. However, if we keep on doing the same thing over and over again, then we limit our growth. It's the same thing with pretty much any muscle. So even if someone's going to the gym
Hmm.
and working out, building muscle, if we're always doing the exact same exercise, then we're actually almost limiting our muscle growth because
Hmm.
we're only straining our muscle in one way continuously. And what my coach tells me is that you want to be straining your muscles in multiple ways continuously. You want to be
Hmm.
stretching them, pulling them in different angles in different ways. So you can be working on your biceps, but multiple ways. And the more that you do that, actually the stronger your muscles get. And it's the same thing with our thinking and the muscles in our brain about if we limit ourselves to only a certain way of thinking, a certain way of doing, then we limit our brain growth in that
Hmm.
plasticity because we're not stretching. And so the whole idea that we talk about of innovation, of thinking out of the box, is more than just what the business return might be. It's really for us as well in our growth and in our development.
That was a very beautiful analogy. It makes things more clear to me, and I'm sure to everyone listening to this right now as well. It, you know, reframing isn't just a mindset trick. It actually changes how the brain process emotions and stress. But that brings up a real concern, because reframing can sometimes be misunderstood as avoiding reality, or pretending pain doesn't exist. And you talked about this, right? You talked about this as in someone who is using a lot of limiting words in their sentences. So that's one way to be aware of that they're living in that reality. But my question to you is, how do we distinguish, right, between reframing that empowers us and reframing that bypasses what needs to be felt or healed? There must be a like blurry line. So the question is, where's the distinction?
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm qualified to know that, honestly. And I'm not sure that there's one red line
Hmm.
that would apply for everybody. You know, it I often think about the context of right and wrong,
Hmm.
and looking at the way the world is today, looking back at history, and there are things that we, um, depending on the culture that you have,
Hmm.
that you think is right or wrong.
Hmm. Hmm.
The morality that we have being the right or wrong. And if we just look at history, then
Hmm.
we can see that even in my short lifetime, I was born in the late 60s. We're now in 2025, and things that were acceptable when I was growing up, the way that men and women treated each other, and all what was considered right at then and what's considered right now is nowhere the same.
Hmm.
And
Right.
that is that evolution. And so where is these lines where our reframing, let's say, is unhealthy for us, is a great question. And it's really for somebody who's specifically more qualified in a therapeutic nature to help with that specific person to understand, is that or is that not?
Hmm.
And we unfortunately have gone through a year where there's been tremendous violence throughout the world. And with it comes a lot of post-traumatic distress order and all of those things. And so, when and I've only lightly been learning about trauma therapy.
Hmm.
What one does to help somebody move past trauma is a different methodology than what someone does to help somebody move past uh, procrastination that has just come around because of something not traumatic specifically. So I had a great boxed answer for you. I don't think there is a boxed answer.
Right, right, absolutely. I mean, from a universal perspective, I mean, uh, that's absolutely like right in the sense, even time isn't like absolute, right? And we know that, and so it is, it struck me that there is no absolute right or wrong. It just changes with time and with the person observing the reality. That's a very important distinction, Yossi, and it tells me that real healing doesn't erase pain. It changes the way we relate to it. And before we wrap up, Yossi, for anyone who wants to go deeper into your work, whether it's coaching, content, or this maybe staying connected, what's the best place for them to find you and learn more?
The best place is LinkedIn. And if you have the ability to put my LinkedIn address in the show notes, it's also, if you just look on LinkedIn, my name, I'm the only Yosi Kossowsky on LinkedIn as far as I've been able to find. So that's just another way. And on my LinkedIn page, there's a button for booking 30 minutes of a conversation if anybody wants to have it. And yeah, I feel that we really can get stuck pretty easily. And some unstucknesses take a lot of time, and some don't take that much time. And either which way, we either stay where we are or we start the journey towards a change.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Yossi. We'll make sure those links are in the show notes so people can dive in deeper into your work. And honestly, I think after a conversation like this, a lot of people will.
I hope so. I really would look forward to it. Thank you.
Wonderful. And with that, dear listeners, we hit the mark of today's show. It was a very transformative dialogue from Yossi. Yossi, thank you for taking us into a space where most people really avoid, the part of the story where we think we are powerless, right? And my biggest takeaway from today is this: victimhood isn't about weakness, it's about where we stop believing that we have a choice, right? And the moment that we start reframing our story, our emotional world and the way we lead starts to change as well. So, to everyone who's listening to this right now, here's the question I'm sitting with after this conversation. Not why is this happening to me, but what can I do with this now? This little shift alone in your mentality can turn the pain into clarity and clarity into momentum. This is AiBiz, where emotional intelligence meets leadership in the real world. Until next time, stay aware, stay intentional, and remember the story isn't fixed yet.